Well, the thing to realise about project management is that almost everything's a project. If you're a manager, it's maybe your job to run something, but it's also your job to improve it and to constantly be thinking, how can we make it better? And that's what managers are really for. They could run the department without you. Your job's to improve it. And as soon as you start to improve on something, it's a project. Because a project is something that is new, you're going into the unknown, it's maybe going to cost money, it's certainly going to take time, and that's a project. So in order to do project management, we need to have some sort of process that's going to help us go into the unknown and minimise the mess and minimise the chances of things going wrong. This is difficult because by definition projects are unique. So we need to have a way of thinking and planning about what might happen and who's going to do what and how long it'll take and what it's going to cost. So there is a methodical process you can use for project management. Most of it's planning. Once the project actually starts to unfold, there are some things you need to do as well, to do with monitoring it. And at the end of the project, it's very important to review it, because that's the only time you can learn. So a very brief outline of the process involved with project management. The first thing is to define the task. Absolutely vital. If you don't define it, or you define it badly, then you'll suffer later. So it's very important to get this absolutely clear. Particularly the three main areas: how much is it going to cost, what is the quality specification required, or the success criteria, and how long is it going to take. You need to agree that with your customer, whoever they are. Sometimes it's hard to know who your customer is, it sometimes is your boss or whatever, but you need to know who it is, agree it with them in writing, and get them to sign to say, if you do this, I will be happy. I know it's a bit scary, but if you don't define it, you'll regret it later, because they'll move the goalposts during the project and they'll complain afterwards it wasn't what they wanted. So get it defined on paper. Once you've worked out what the project is, you can then start to plan it. And the first step towards planning it is to list the tasks. Now this is probably best done as a brainstorm with your team, if you've got a team. Get a great big random list of all the tasks that might be involved, and then put them into some sort of logical structure, sometimes known as a work breakdown structure. You can show your work breakdown structure to somebody who's done a similar project before, or compare it with history, if there is any history. And that's a good way to make sure that you haven't missed anything. There's usually some resident expert who'll have a look at it and pick holes in it. And that's really useful. If you miss a task, your project will take longer than you thought and will cost more than you thought. So you're really heading for trouble if you miss a task. So you list out all the tasks and then make them into some sort of diagram, usually known as a network diagram or PERT chart. And the idea of this diagram is to work out what depends on what. And as you draw the diagram, you'll be able to think about what has to be done before what. This running order will then allow you to find the critical path, which is the longest route through. And this will tell you how long the project's going to take. If the time you come out with is too long, then you have to look at something called crashing, which is basically to either throw money at one of the tasks to make it shorter, or to look at overlapping tasks, which of course is more risky, to do one at the same time as another. But that may be necessary in order to get the critical path down. So you've listed the tasks and you've got a critical path diagram drawn out. Once you're happy with that, you can then draw a Gantt chart. Now some people jump straight to a Gantt chart, but you shouldn't really, because the Gantt chart is all based around the critical path. So you need to draw a network diagram in order to find the critical path, and then you can draw a Gantt chart. The Gantt chart shows each task against a time scale along the horizontal, so it shows how long each task is expected to take. And it's based around the critical path, so you draw the critical path in first, just going down corner to corner, and then you put in all the floating tasks, the non-critical ones. Gantt chart has three purposes. One is communication, everybody can understand it. Second one is that you can look vertically down any given week or day or month, and you can see whether you've got a resource problem or not. Have you got lots of things on the go at the same time? Of course, you can have a Gantt chart with several projects on as well if you need to. And the third thing the Gantt chart is really useful for is monitoring progress. As the project unfolds, you can colour in the tasks as they're done. And this allows you to see whether you're keeping up with the today line or not. Final bit of planning after you've done your Gantt chart is just to look at it and think, what might go wrong? This is risk analysis. Get a list of all the things that might go wrong. Assess them for how serious are they if they do happen, and how likely are they to happen. And if they're quite likely and serious, then you really do need to have some sort of plan. If they're not likely or serious, then you don't need to worry. So you make sure you've got a plan, and the plan should either be to make them less likely to happen, or perhaps to make them less serious if they do happen. Clearly it's better to make things less likely if you can, but some things can't be avoided, so then you just need to have a protective action plan to cover it if it does happen and make it less serious. So, once you've done your planning, you then monitor progress using the Gantt chart. Probably need to have a weekly or a monthly meeting with your team to discuss the Gantt chart and progress. You'll also be measuring cost. Quite often people have cost figures from their accountants. It tells you, ooh, you should have spent 80,000, you've only spent 70,000, so that's all right. But what they don't realise is you've only done half the work. So you need to look at the cost figures and compare them with your Gantt chart. If you compare progress with cost, you can then look at whether you're okay or not. And you can forecast what the finished cost at completion is likely to be. That's, of course, the figure that everybody wants to know. So you monitor progress on the Gantt chart, you monitor cost, and you make sure that you communicate a lot so everybody knows what's happening, particularly if the plan's been modified. If you've had to face facts that the project has slipped and you've reissued a new Gantt chart, you need to make sure everybody understands it. The final stage of project management is review. As I mentioned before, this is the only time the organisation can learn. During the review, you should ask 3 questions. First of all, what was good? What went well that we can record and make sure that we repeat next time? That's the difference between luck and skill. Knowing what you did so you can do it again. So what was good? What was bad? Not so we can give people a hard time, because the chances are they're kicking themselves anyway. You don't need to give them a hard time. The point is we can learn from it. So what was bad that we don't want to fall for next time? Make a note so that we don't fall for it again. Remember that you all have learnt, hopefully, from the mistakes you've made, but the others in the team may not, and certainly other people in the organisation probably won't even know. So you have to have a no-blame culture, a good review, and confess, and write it down in some sort of book of reviews so that anyone can look and think, that's interesting, we must make sure we don't fall for that one as well. So, what was good, what was bad, and finally, what could we have done better? Knowing what we now know, is there anything that we wish we'd done or that we could do next time to make the project even better? And that's project management.